You check your bank account on a Tuesday. You didn't buy the coffee this week. You skipped the impulse purchase sitting in your cart for 3 days. You cooked at home again, and the number is still almost exactly where it was last month. That's the moment it stops making sense. You did everything right. You budgeted. You said no over and over when saying yes would have been so much easier. You watched other people spend recklessly while you stayed disciplined. So why does your bank account look like theirs? Here's the truth nobody tells you. Not overspending was never the same thing as building wealth. You can avoid every unnecessary purchase for a decade and still end up broke because the real leak in your finances isn't where your money goes. It's where your money sits. Let's start with what actually happens to money that just sits. In 2022, inflation in the United States peaked above 9%, the highest in 4 decades. That means a dollar sitting in a checking account earning close to zero interest lost roughly 9 cents of real value in a single year. Real value means what that dollar can actually buy, not the number printed on your statement. Your balance stayed the same. Your purchasing power didn't. You didn't spend that money. Inflation spent it for you one invisible percentage point at a time. This is the first thing your budget never accounted for. A dollar saved today is not a dollar tomorrow. It's a shrinking dollar quietly losing weight while you feel proud of not touching it. And the frustrating part is that nothing about this shows up as a transaction. There's no line item labeled money you lost by doing nothing. It just happens silently in the background of every bank statement you've ever felt good about. But there's a second deeper leak, and this one is psychological. Behavioral economist Richard Thaler won the Nobel Prize in economics for a concept called mental accounting. Mental accounting is the tendency to treat money differently depending on which mental bucket you put it in, even though a dollar is a dollar no matter where it sits. You treat the money in your checking account as safe. You treat the money you haven't spent as a small trophy for restraint. But safety and growth are not the same thing. A dollar that never leaves your checking account isn't protected. It's paralyzed. Think about what not overspending actually optimizes for. It optimizes for avoiding loss today. It does nothing for growth tomorrow. And your brain is wired to care about avoiding loss far more than it cares about missing out on a gain. Psychologist Daniel Kahneman, who later won the Nobel Prize for this work, called this loss aversion, the finding that losing $100 feels roughly twice as painful as gaining $100 feels good. So you white-knuckle your spending. You feel the sting of every purchase you deny yourself, but you feel almost nothing about the money quietly not growing in the background. There's no pain signal for stagnation. Nothing beeps when your money stalls. That's exactly why it goes unnoticed for years, sometimes for an entire working life. There's a third pressure working against you too. One economist, C. Northcote Parkinson, described back in the 1950s when he observed that expenses tend to rise to meet whatever income is available. You might call this lifestyle creep. Even the most disciplined saver often unconsciously lets their baseline expectations expand the moment their income grows: a slightly nicer apartment, a slightly newer car. Small upgrades that never feel like overspending in the moment, because each one seems reasonable on its own. None of these purchases would show up on a list of impulsive mistakes, but together they quietly cancel out the very discipline you're proud of, leaving your savings rate flat even as your income climbs. There's also a cost that never shows up on any receipt at all. Economists call it opportunity cost, the value of what you gave up by choosing one option over another. Every dollar you leave sitting in a checking account isn't just failing to grow. It's actively not becoming the version of itself that could have grown somewhere else. You never see this cost. There's no charge, no fee, no withdrawal. Just a quieter, smaller future than the one you could have had built entirely out of money you technically still have. So let's walk through what actually happens when you successfully avoid overspending, not just for 1 year, but for 10. Say you save $500 a month by cutting back. Disciplined, consistent, no overspending at all. Do that for 10 years, and you've set aside $60,000. Left in a savings account earning close to nothing, after a decade of ordinary inflation, that pile is worth meaningfully less in real terms than the number on the screen, closer to $45,000 or $50,000 in actual buying power. You feel accomplished. Your net worth barely moved. Now picture a different person. Same income, same $500 a month. But instead of letting it sit, they put it into a low-cost index fund, a basket of hundreds of companies bundled into a single investment, so you're not betting on any one stock. Historically, the U.S. stock market has returned close to 10% a year before inflation, according to data going back nearly a century that economist Burton Malkiel laid out in his book, A Random Walk Down Wall Street. At that pace, the same $500 a month over the same 10 years grows to somewhere north of $95,000. Because compounding where your returns start earning their own returns, so growth builds on top of growth, does more of the work each year than the year before. Same discipline, same income, same restraint. A gap of roughly $50,000 between them after just one decade, and it keeps widening every year after that. The difference wasn't how much they didn't spend, it was what happened to the money after that. Here's the twist most people never see coming. Not spending money can feel identical to building wealth right up until you check your net worth 10 years later and realize it never actually grew. Discipline without direction just means you're standing still more carefully than everyone else. You've been so focused on not losing ground that you never noticed you weren't gaining any either. This is exactly what researcher Thomas Stanley found when he studied actual millionaires for his book, The Millionaire Next Door. The pattern wasn't high income. Plenty of high earners had almost nothing to show for it because their money either got spent or sat idle in accounts that never grew. The pattern was what people did with the gap between what they earned and what they spent. The ones who built real wealth treated that gap as raw material, something to be put to work immediately, not as a trophy for restraint. Not overspending was the starting line for them. For most people, it's mistaken for the finish line the moment the budgeting app shows a positive number, and the story quietly ends there. And this is where the Federal Reserve's Survey of Consumer Finances tells an uncomfortable story. Households whose savings sit mostly in cash accounts consistently show far slower net worth growth over time than households with comparable income who hold assets in the stock market. Not because the cash savers spent more, not because they were less careful, because the money never left the bucket that doesn't grow year after year, while the other household's money kept working even while they slept. So mirror this onto your own life for a second. Every month you don't overspend, you're winning a battle. But if the money from that battle just accumulates in a checking account, you're not compounding a victory. You're freezing it in place while inflation, lifestyle creep, and opportunity cost all work against you in the background silently without ever sending you a notification. What looks like safety on your banking app is actually a slow leak you were never trained to see. The system was never built to punish you for spending. It was built to reward people who understand that money is supposed to move. Idle money isn't neutral. It's actively losing ground every single day. It isn't invested, taxed by inflation, unclaimed by growth, sitting in an account that was never designed to build anything, only to hold it in place until you finally decide to spend it or move it. This doesn't mean the answer is to spend more. It means restraint was only ever step one. The real question was never, how much did I avoid spending this month? It was always, what did I do with the money I didn't spend? You check your bank account again. You still didn't buy the coffee. You still skipped the impulse purchase. But this time you know the number in front of you was never the real scoreboard. The real scoreboard is what that number is doing while you're not looking, whether it's sitting still or finally starting to move.